Georgicus. It's just an interesting case because we have 4 or 5 skulls and we have some variability here. And these little people aren't African. Again, little people are too small to leave Africa, right? Wrong. These are small people. These are, again, 4 feet tall, very much like the Homo habilis. So, or early Erectus, one or the other. Well, let's look at Erectus. Erectus is very close to us. Coeloring Brace, the paleoanthropologist from Michigan, had a chapter heading, Homo erectus, the true man at last. Maybe not a true man, but certainly closer to us. Why are they close to us? They're close to us in body shape, in body size, and they have spread all over. I don't know if they spread that far into Siberia, but they have certainly spread elsewhere. They have tools that look really neat and are hard to duplicate. And they live in cold areas and they have fire, eventually. This is where they went. On the left we have a skull of Homo habilis, and on the right, one of the Homo erectus skulls. And I don't know if these are to scale, but the Homo erectus has a much larger brain. About 900 cc's, almost a quart, whereas Homo habilis just has a quart or a little bit, or a pint rather, or a little bit less. This is a picture of a man from Zenlantian on the left, and on the right, a lady from the lower cave outside of Beijing in China. The one on the left is around 800,000 years old. The one on the right is around 400,000 years old. Homo erectus is kind of, I forgot to put in stuff about Dubois. Homo erectus is a very odd one because it was the first one found outside of Europe, first fossil, and it was found by a guy named Eugen Dubois, who was a Dutch physician who was interested in fossils. Now, this is unusual, and not only was the first fossil found outside of Europe, but this was the first fossil that was named, described, and then he left to Java to go find it. You don't usually do it that way. You do it the opposite way. You find it, you name it, you describe it. But he was going to go find it, and he did. But what he found was a skull cap, femur, a few other odd pieces. And the femur looked almost like a modern human. The only thing missing was a linea aspera. It was a little concavity on the lower back of the femur. That was missing. That was a convexity instead of a concavity. There was also an exostosis, that is, the person had been injured and the bone had grown out of the usual track, so there was a big clump sticking out. It's supposed to have been hard to walk. But the skull cap was just a skull cap. It was just if you had known doctors back when I was a kid, every doctor had an ashtray that was made out of the top of the skull of the body that he had cut up in medical school. That was just normal. Every doctor had one of those. And that's exactly what Dubois found. He found essentially a calvarium, an ashtray, put it upside down. Now, he went back to Holland, back to Europe. He brought the bones back. This was a human. This was an ancient human, maybe 500,000 years old, maybe 1 million. Of course, that was outrageous at that time. Humans didn't live 1 million years ago. And he was castigated. He was told, yeah, the femur is human, but the skull cap belongs to a giant gibbon. So they're not the same. If you have a human femur like that, you've got to have a human head that goes with it, and not one of those funny gibbons. Well, he eventually accepted this pronouncement, put the bones in a box under his bed, and died knowing full well that he was absolutely wrong. Well, by that time, the whole scientific community had changed its mind, and we had a lot more finds from Java and from China. But he died, by the way, also after World War I, he changed his name to Eugene to make it sound French. Here's another erectus skull. Those big brow ridges over the eye, but still a capacious skull. Also, another characteristic of Homo erectus is if you cut the skull from side to side in cross section, you had skull a skull that looked like this, a gabled ball. And there's a big vein that runs right there. I had one like that myself, still. They were really bald. You can see it when I have that bald. So, once again, we put this picture up before. There's Lucy in the middle, Homo erectus on the left, and Homo sapiens on the right. And quite obviously, Homo erectus looks a lot like Homo sapiens. It's the right size, it's the right shape. The only thing is missing is the face is big and the brain is smaller than average for modern humans. This is a picture to scale instead of rearranged. And also a footprint that we have from Homo erectus. That look like a chimpanzee's foot? No, it looks like a human foot, doesn't it? Just a classic straight away human foot, period. Well, what did they look like? This was the first reconstruction from Dubois' individual done by McGregor for the American Museum of Natural History. This is a later reconstruction from other skulls, Homo erectus. This is maybe what a Homo erectus kid would look like, about 8 or 10 years old. Here's another picture of Homo erectus. Here's another one. This was done in Germany. And here's one that's probably as close as any of them, period. So what did Homo erectus do for a living? They hunted. They became very good hunters. They became expert hunters. They hunted intelligently. Now, most of the early pictures of cavemen fighting mammoths and so forth had them standing in front of the mammoth and bravely trying to kill the animal, but that's the stupid way to do it. The smart way, of course, is to have 2 or 3 guys get the attention of the animal and then have 1 or 2 going around the back and stick a spear in the rear end until it bleeds to death, which is not very dignified and not very nice, but I mean, if you're looking at a mammoth, that's well, they hunted animals this big. Pigs at that time were the size of cattle today. Some really big ones. We have sites, we have home sites, we have places where we have fire, and they gathered together. They brought their food back to one spot. We have butchering sites where they killed the animal. We have working sites where they worked flint, brought flint back, or whatever material they were to use for tools. And we have home sites for Homo erectus. This is tool making. These are some hand axes. These are some other hand axes, somewhat different shapes. And we're still not totally clear as to what they were used for, but they were probably used for a number of different things. They're big, they're about this long, anywhere from this to about that, which is a pretty good hunk of stone. And if you bring it down on top of something, it will hurt, and it will cut. Here's a view of one from 4 different sides. Here are some other ones. One on the left is a hand axe. The one on the right is a flake. Again, we thought that maybe the flakes weren't used as much as the cores, but now we see that upon microscopic examination, that the